Okay, can you hear us in the room?
Can you hear us?
So let us know if at any point the audio quality is not good. Okay, so we have quorum. We have 14 members here and 2 proxies, so 16 in total. So I call this meeting to order. Myself as the Vice President Internal will preside over the meeting until a speaker and deputy speaker are elected, which are items 2 and 3 on the agenda. So call to order. Before we address the regular business of this meeting, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe, lands never surrendered or ceded in peace to the Crown of Canada. Indigenous peoples living under the modern colonial state of Canada have suffered disproportionate injustice and marginalization. A mere land acknowledgement is not enough to make reconciliation and reparation to the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. We must stand in solidarity against colonialism and remember our responsibility to the land and the peoples who have kept it for generations, which means affirming their call for the free and unencumbered return of their ancestral land. It is also fitting for this body of lawmakers to remember the spirit and wisdom of Indigenous governance models, from the collaborative bicameralism of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy to the consensus-based government of the Inuit, to deliver to students a better student union. So with that, we will proceed to item 2 on the agenda, the election of speaker. So we have a recommendation from the Speaker Hiring Committee, which met over the course of last week. It was an open application process accessible to all counselors. And the hiring committee has for us today a recommendation for speaker of the 2023-2024 CUSA Council. And that is Nkosi Maklanga, who is joining us today here in the room. So for the election of speaker, because we only have one recommendation from the panel, I'll open it up to anyone else who wants to self-nominate themselves, as they do have that power to do so. Otherwise, it will just be a simple confidence vote, simple majority, a secret ballot for Nkosi to become speaker. So if there is no one else nominating themselves for speaker, we will proceed to that secret ballot confidence vote for Nkosi. So because it's a secret ballot, for those of you in the room, I have just paper. So it'll just be a question of confidence or no confidence. So yes, confidence. And if you put no, that means no confidence in Nkosi for speaker. So for those of you in the room, we have this and you can fill it out and submit it and I'll tally the votes. And for those of you online, I think it's easiest if everyone send me a message on Zoom. Make sure it's a direct message to me, my account. So the Logan Breen VPI. That way I'm the only one seeing them right here on my laptop. So it'll still be secret. And of course, all the data will be removed afterward. And just send your vote. Make sure it's a direct message to me, whether it's a yes confidence or no confidence for Nkosi. Okay, so send me the votes and I'll distribute it here in the room and we'll be back when we have everything tallied. Okay, so I've tallied the votes and there is confidence in the CUSA as speaker. So congratulations. And we will now move to item number 3, which is the election of deputy speaker. Same case scenario, the speaker hiring committee met. It was a free and open application to all councillors. The hiring committee have submitted the recommendation of Aidan Rowacek as deputy speaker of council. So I'll open it up now if anyone would like to nominate for deputy speaker. And if not, we'll proceed again to another vote of confidence in Aidan for deputy speaker.
I nominate.
For yourself?
Sorry.
So it's
Are
self-nomination.
we seconding? Or
No.
No.
So if you'd like to nominate yourself for deputy speaker. Okay, we're good.
You're good. I'm new here.
So I'll say it one more time. Would anyone like to nominate themselves for deputy speaker? Okay, so Jalen in the chat has said that they would like to nominate themselves. So at this point, it will no longer be a confidence vote and it will be a vote between the two candidates. So Jalen and Aidan. So given that there are two candidates, every candidate has the ability to give up to 5 minutes remarks to council about why councillors should vote for them. So I'd like to open the floor to either Jalen or Aidan to begin, if they would like to deliver remarks before we go to voting. So yeah, Aidan, go ahead.
All right, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Awesome. So I decided to run for the position of deputy speaker because I believe the role of the presiding officer, and in the case of deputy speaker, is extremely important in the functionings of council. The deputy speaker and the speaker have an important role as they essentially can help train and set up council to be in a position to succeed. Rules of order, policy, and all that comes with it can be very daunting. And if it's not communicated in a way that is properly understood by councillors, it can make things difficult. I want to go into this role because I want to see council succeed this year. I want to see councillors confident in their abilities, and I want to see them speak up and be involved in passing policy and making council work this year. And I believe that I have the proper skills to be able to make that happen. The previous year, I served as a raw councillor, and in this role, I saw firsthand the role of a presiding officer, and I gained firsthand experience with Robert's rules. So I'm familiar with the operations of a council, similar to that of CUSA Council, and have experience using the rules that we use to govern ourselves. On top of that, I have served as the chair of RAW CPRC committee, which is Constitution and Policy Review. And in this committee, I had to constantly update and rewrite and pass new policies to improve RAW and its operations. Now, this role was important because much like CUSA, RAW had very extensive governance that had to be overseen. As deputy speaker, in the event that I would be brought up to chair, I would have to adhere to the numerous governance policies that have been passed and put in place to ensure we adhere to the Constitution on all our bylaws. And with experience in this role, I believe I'm confident that I can make the best rulings and ensure that council flows properly. Now, the biggest thing I can promise to you all is I like procedure. I used to do Model UN. I still do Model UN. So I have experience with rules, with debate, and this is not something that is foreign to me. And I want to make Robert's rules accessible to all councillors, as that's how we encourage people to get involved. If we don't make these rules accessible, people can't understand what's going on. We're not going to have a productive council session, and we won't be able to live up to the potential that students saw when they put their faith in us. So the biggest promise I can make to you all is if elected to deputy speaker, I will memorize and I will know that book inside and out. if there's an event where anything is called into question, there is an uncertainty as to what position should we take or rules, I can promise you that I will have an answer. And I think that's what's important. Councillors need to have faith in their speaker and deputy speaker to make rulings and have confidence in their knowledge of Robert's rules so they can be confident in their own abilities. And I believe that in this role, I can bring that confidence to council and ensure that we have a productive and successful year. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'd like to open it up to, hold on. Okay, so Jalen says in the chat, after hearing Aiden and his personal experience, I do believe he is best fit for speaker. I retract my nomination. Thank you for the opportunity to possibly gain the role. So with that, we will go into the same case scenario with the speaker election, and it'll just be a confidence vote in Aiden as deputy speaker. So for those of you online, I'd ask that you just, again, make sure you send me a direct message. It's either yes confidence or no confidence. And for those of you in the room, I'll distribute the forms and I'll be back with the results. Okay, so with that, the votes have been tallied. So I'd like to welcome the new deputy speaker of council, Councillor Rochek. Congratulations. So being that the two elections of speaker are completed, I'll now hand it over to your actual speaker, Nikosi.
All right, hi everyone. It's very nice to be officially your speaker. So we now move on to the fourth item on our agenda. That's the election of a clerk to council as a recommendation from the hiring committee. It was McKenna Bellemare who was elected as clerk. And so now we move to a vote of confidence, or actually rather, is there anyone who would like to nominate themselves for this role? No, just going to approve it. Okay, perfect. So we're just going to approve it. Yeah.
So it would same thing, it's a vote.
Okay, so it's like a vote of confidence. So for those here, I will be handing out paper, and for those online, how are you doing it?
Same thing, just send me a private message.
Okay, yeah. Let's go ahead and do that.
Yeah. What are we voting on? What?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Confidence vote?
Yes, I'm gonna go with so.
And what does it say? All right, so be it resolved that McKenna Bellemere has been elected as clerk to council. Congratulations. Yeah. And so now we move on to our fifth motion, approval of the agenda. I will need someone to move it and second. Yeah, can I have a mover?
I can.
Thank you. And a seconder?
I can second it.
Thank you. So be it resolved that the agenda is approved as presented to council, notwithstanding section 18 of the council rules of order. And now we move to approve the past minutes. So CO5, A and B. We need to vote on it. So how do you vote on that? Like tally again?
So you need a mover and a seconder.
All right, so can I get someone to move it and a seconder, please? So someone to move the motion?
I moved it in 8 seconds.
Okay, perfect. So now we move on to voting for it. Okay. So can I have a show of hands for yes? 1, 2, 3. Online, any hands? In counting? Are you counting them? Are you counting the hands on the Zoom?
That's. It seems to have passed.
Okay, perfect. So be it resolved that the minutes of AGM part 1, 2, and 3 of council have been approved. Now we move on to the section 7 of our agenda. Wasima Jumun, sorry for the pronunciation, Member Relations Officer at the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations, CUSA. You can see the presentation, there's a link in the document, the agenda. And
So she's not coming till 7.
okay,
So what we'll do is we'll skip into the executive reports, and then when she arrives at 7, we'll go back. to the presentation.
all right. If didn't catch that on the Zoom, the person is running late. We'll move to that later at 7. So skipping ahead, we're going to go to the executive report, starting with Mr. President Paris.
Thank you, Nkosi, for that. So before we begin, before I go over my report, I just want to say thank you so much for all counselors for coming to our first council meeting. I am honored to be part of work along with this amazing group today. Just on a note that CUSA has changed a lot in the past couple of years. For good, I'd say that. And moving forward, I want to say that this council is one that's dedicated, is a good representative to the student voices and the student body at Carleton, and one that is vigilant in responding to student issues and the concerns of students. So I hope that my team and I are able to provide you with that sort of outlook in a way, and we ask all of you to hold us accountable to our promises and our actions as executives of the association and elected representatives of the student body, and as just the way you folks are. So I guess with that, I will begin with my executive report. You can always go through it as on the agenda. So the past month, the executive team has been onboarding with full-time staff, which includes training and other transition with full-time staff and previous executives as well. This year, we hold ourselves accountable to the student body. We'll be taking a lot of measures. One is a strategic roadmap, which has never been done in CUSA before. A strategic roadmap is essentially that CUSA will provide you with a roadmap in its essence that would outline all the goals and sort of aspirations for the year that we as an executive team will present to council. Hopefully by the September council meeting or prior to that, we'll have one that we will be publishing. In the past month alone, we've created a new system within CUSA. The associate vice president, as most of you might know, the associate vice president is a new governing structure at CUSA that will be there to represent the student population on campus and also be part of the executive team. They're sort of like the executive adjacents that will be helping the executive on day-to-day work depending on their portfolio. So as of the closing day of the application, we received to be exact 215 applications. It's the highest job turnout requisition you've ever received at CUSA for job postings that we've had. It goes to say about how the association has been changing in a way, and also be better representative to the student body. It's also one of the goals was to open ourselves to the student body and not be isolated for students. So there are 9 executive positions for them: executive relations, university and academic affairs, government affairs, student funds, student groups. We have research and advocacy campaigns, external affairs, and student experience. The timeline for that is we just closed as of today. We're selecting the candidates for interviews. Candidates will be hearing from us in the next 24 to 48 hours. We'll be setting up interviews all of next week, and then the plan is that the AVPs will start on June the 12th. Or the week of the June 12th, that's the plan, where they will be onboarded. Myself and the director of student development are planning a training for the AVPs so they can better integrate within CUSA. The next thing, the executive team participated in the spring open house as part of our sort of extended partnership with the university, where we're participating in recruitment events. We also prepared the WASIA report. So an update on folks is CUSA will be looking into providing a new a mental health program called WASIA. It's in-house counseling services that we're hoping that we use our service centers as part of the triaging system. It's a joint project that we're hoping to work with the university on, and it's dedicated to cater towards those folks from the marginalized communities. We're hoping that we will launch this program within the fall term. In this way, we're looking in the addition of 5 new counselors, mental health counselors. There'll be professionals from the community, and which will be funded to CUSA. So it's a big step that we're providing 5 new counselors on campus, and we're currently in sort of we're in conversations with the university about how this program will fit in within the existing health and counseling department. So pending more information. But if anyone wants to hear about this report, WASIA, it's an Ojibwe word for pathways or radiance, right? The next thing is federal advocacy. Myself, Vice President Internal and Vice President of Issues, met with the Executive Director for CUSA, which is the Canadian Alliance for Student Associations, and their Member Relations Officer, who's going to be joining us pretty soon, in an effort so that CUSA can delve more into federal advocacy, that we can advocate to MPs for about student issues, right? Moving on to provincial advocacy, we met with the Ottawa Center MPP Joe Harden earlier last week. In an effort to talk about mental health programs, we talked about the WSIR report, we talked about support for international students coming to the country, and on other advocacy issues related to the province. So yeah, that was that, and then within the university advocacy, part of my portfolio last year was on repainting the rainbow crosswalk as you on Colonel Light Drive. So the update is that the crosswalk will be repainted sometime next month for Pride Month. And there will be an inauguration ceremony with activists from the community, from the queer and trans community that will be taking part in this ceremony. We also talked about updating the Dane walls to make it more refreshing for students, as was one of the initiatives that the UPSI had for making student like campus be more in terms of wellness. Where I'm also working with the VP Student Life to revamp the street team. It's going to be a total revamp of what we've seen. We're looking at it as a subsidiary wing of CUSA in terms of volunteering and getting involved on CUSA and increasing that hype within campus. And it's on the works, and almost by the next month we'll have a major update on what it looks like. Another big advocacy initiative that I'm working with the university and the Board of Governors is menstrual products. We're talking about doing a pilot program within the university on select high trafficking buildings that will be provided with free menstrual products for students. The talk is a company, a vending company, a company that provides the vending or like dispensary for menstrual products. And there will be a joint initiative between CUSA, the university, that we'll be doing. We're also looking to secure some grants for this initiative. But so yeah, that's an update. It's been a busy month for us within training and onboarding, but also quick and effective change within CUSA this past month. So yes, thank you so much.
All right, and then we're moving on to VP Internal, Logan Green.
So I'll try to be quick here, as there are a lot of executives and a lot of it's going to be kind of a repetition. But for us and our first month at CUSA, it's been a very productive month. We had a great onboarding and training session. We met with a lot of different stakeholders within CUSA, within the university, within the community, including the local MPP, including meetings with the Canadian Association, the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations. And we have a lot more planned for the coming months in terms of onboarding and training for us executives. Highlights of my month particularly is I've met quite a few times with our wonderful student groups administrator in how to proceed forward with clubs oversight and making sure there's recertification, certification, summer funding for clubs, and also in trying to formulate an executive strategy on how to address some of the issues within the club systems and within clubs oversight procedure. And that's something that I'll talk about a little more in clubs oversight and as well in our executive roadmap, which will come out in the coming weeks. Other things to note for me for the last month is that we had our first clubs oversight meeting, and we'll be appointing a counselor to that later in today's council meeting. As I mentioned, we had a meeting with the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations with MPP Joel Harden, and as well a large role for me in the last month was reviewing our council committee policies and coming up with what I believe to be a very worthwhile proposal, which we'll discuss later in this council meeting. And finally, for me, for ongoing and future projects, a big part of my time over the next month will be preparation for council training for all of you, which will take place on the 24th and 25th of June. Again, I'll talk a little bit more into that in detail later during our items of information. As VP Internal, a lot of what I have to do at CUSA is review of expiring policies for both council and board. So that's something I'll be looking at. And during the next board and council meetings, we'll have those policies before council and board to have them reviewed. And finally, committee placements for counselors. You'll notice it's something we're not doing at this committee meeting, but it's something we'll all be managing over the coming months, and eventually we'll confirm the committee placements in our June council meeting and have committees ready for our club training session. So that is all for me. Thanks.
Thank you. And now we have VP Student Issues, Amelia.
Alrighty, okay. First off, hi everyone. I'm really, if you already don't know me, I'm very excited to work with all of you this year as your Vice President of Student Issues. I'm gonna keep it, of course, short and simple. Just a review of the month. Of course, we went through our onboarding and training. Met with my former PPSI over here, ours, and of course, all the CUSA staff. We went on a retreat and we drafted our executive roadmap for the year, which is really exciting. Which of course we will be sharing in the near future with all of you. We also attended the first board meeting. We met with CUSA, just to discuss the steps and impacts that CUSA will have on CUSA if we do join the alliance as an observer. I've currently been planning Capital Pride, which will be August 27th. And you all are more than welcome to join us in the parade. So I've been planning that with the GSRC and also some of the university stakeholders as well. I've also been meeting with some of the service centers to already start planning some of our campaigns, like Orange Shirt Day. Met with Hallie in Wandeseg and Rise. We've been planning Mosaic, so Eddie over here, our new Rise coordinator, and Nenki as well. And some ongoing and future projects. Of course, we're attending COCA soon. Planning, we actually just had a meeting today, Iman and I, with the ISSO planning fall orientation, specifically directed for international students. We're very excited for that. Also, a big thing I'm going to get into is reviewing our CUSA awards, as that is something that happens throughout the whole entire year. So making sure that we have that process outlined, so it just goes smoother than the previous years. And then strategic planning and ideation of news, which is a new service center that I want to create here at Carleton, which is a service center of like creative freedom. It'll be a space where students can come work on their craft. If they have a small business, there'll be like computers for people who are into graphic design, places for people to take like pictures, like if they're like actual like models, not like photography or scenery, of course. But like just like a creative space where people can really come enjoy it, but also a space where outside Ottawa creatives come and utilize the space and we can actually make profit off of that and host workshops for students, by students or by other outside creatives. Then I'm also looking to meet with CASG and faculty deans and the Senate to start discussing syllabus updates. I've started some of my research in terms of like seeing where CUSA is actually mentioned in syllabuses. I've probably gone through a near 100 syllabuses, and I'm focusing mainly on like first year students, every single faculty, and I've only seen like 3 syllabuses that mention CUSA, and even that it's like at the very bottom and it's outdated as well. So proposing to them to actually like give them a whole sheet that includes everything about CUSA, like the important aspects, like at least. And it'll be to discuss the syllabuses, and then also the instructor accountability form, which is one of the things I stood on like during my election. Yeah. We'll discuss further detail, but that's what I have.
All right, thank you. And now we move to VP Finance, Sean.
So for myself, to not be repetitive, I'm just gonna focus on what I've been working on that pertains to my particular role. So for the month in review, I began working on the budget preparation for the coming fiscal year, just so that we have a better idea of what we should be planning for. How we're gonna be moving about with that. I met with the portfolio manager for the Sports Student Investment Fund, because basically what I'm trying to work on is a plan to diversify CUSA's investment portfolio. So because right now it's a bit low risk and a bit how do I describe it? Yeah, anyways, just to keep it simple, to diversify our current investment portfolio. Kind of for ongoing and future projects, we have been given a deadline by the board of July 17th to complete and submit a final report of the budget, so that's what I'm looking to continue working on and hopefully finish in the next coming months, and have it, kind of reviewed and processed, hopefully to get it ready well before the 17th of July. Also, I'm currently still in talks with the SSIF to get that deal done, although it's been kind of difficult because we've hit a few roadblocks, but I'm working around ways we can get around that. And then, yes, that is all contained.
Oh, and then we move to Vice President, Student Life, Nady.
You want to read it, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. For everyone to see, so, just as a quick review of what we did in May, like everyone else, just finished onboarding and training, so we met with the senior staff, we sure look over. We also covered our executive roadmap for the 2023 year. And I met with the events program coordinator, Abby, who is in charge of all the events that go around CUSA, to identify areas of improvement for orientation week. So just to see how we can get sort of better for this coming fall orientation. And we did get 4 possible allocated slots for CUSA. So we have from September 4th to 8th, and we're looking to do programming some at night, some in the morning, and those 4 allocated slots when Friday, September 8th is our big sort of night. And one of those days as well, we're looking to partner with old service centers to showcase and really show the services that we offer with CUSA, and that's something in the works. The third thing is the BOD approval for NSHRA sponsorship. So we actually got that approved last night. So BPSL is sponsoring NSHRA. We also finalized, as Ferris mentioned, the new street team structure and timeline. So again, we're really going through a whole revamp of the street team to make sure that we're utilizing them as volunteers, but also really pushing our outreach and keeps the image out there. And some of the ongoing and future projects that we're looking to do is really focusing on our external and internal partnerships. So along UP CE community engagement and Ferris as well, we're meeting with some of the sports teams to discuss partnership on how we can work together to bring scouted tickets for our students, as well as things like Panda. And we're also trying to really focus on partnerships within campus, so SEO, athletics, to make sure that again it's a mutually beneficial partnership. And meetings are to be held in the next week. And really the next steps of the street team is to make sure that we're pushing the branding and for it to have its own brand along with CUSA. And I've met with some of CUSA's businesses, always in particular, to review the outreach and how we can really promote them and push them to students. And some of the last things that we did again, and we're looking to work on more, is meeting with the service center coordinator to collaborate for fall orientation. So again, really push our services that we offer. And we did meet with Axel and Moja to see how we can also partner with them with orientation, but also within the whole year, and how we can utilize those different stakeholders. And that's it for me.
All right, thank you. And now we move to VP Community Engagement, NA.
Hi, everyone. So I'll start with the review as usual. Like everyone else, we finished our onboarding and intensive training with all the staff members of CUSA. Went through the processes, bylaws, things like that. We also had a segment of PR training with core consulting, so communication strategies, senior crisis management, all those good stuff. We created our executive roadmap for the year, a lot of initiatives, our plans, put into one document and like ideation phases as well. I also participated in the last interview for the CDAC hiring process, so that's rounded up. That just leads to the wellness center hiring process there for the new year coordinators. We had the Carlton Summer Fair, so the summer open fair where students, new students and parents came. We discussed with them about CUSA, what services we provide, what resources we have, things like that, and general information about us as an organization for the new students who would be coming in the fall and potentially winter. I also have the first meeting of the Campus Safety Services Community Engagement Table. Essentially, it's just a committee planning interactions between campus safety and students, the relationship between campus safety and students, what can be done to create more engagement between them, more positive engagement aside from just crisis management as well. So they're trying to create an actual relationship with students. So that's what that committee is for. It includes us, raw residents, and a bunch of other campus stakeholders. Then for ongoing and future projects, there's been a lot of reaching out since still the beginning of the year. So a lot of communication meetings with potential partners, school partners, various potentially new partners. So the two major aspects of that are housing organizations. So Reveille, Envy, and etc. I'm trying to reach out to them to try and create more opportunities for affordable housing for students. And then embassies as well to create more job opportunities and volunteer opportunities for international students. Besides that, we're also trying to reach out to more organizations for Flush, so some of the older organizations we've already partnered with, like Drink Smart, and then creating ideas for new partnerships with new organizations who can also bring value to students during orientation period. Also creating a centralized database for CUSA volunteers, so all the service sector volunteers, the new street team ideation volunteers, we must have like a well-put document that has all of them and the partners they work with, just to have a centralized, accessible place where all that information is stored. Then there's conversations between CUSA and OSEC, that's the students, the Ottawa Entertainment Sports Entertainment Group. They're the ones that handle team plays, so potential collaborations with Panda and for some of their sports games as well. Those conversations are already started being in place. We've also had conversations with Umoja as well for potential collaboration. They have some great ideas for initiatives for the year. So we're also working with that, starting to create more ideas, starting the planning for some of the ideas that we already had. And then the last two things are just attending the CUSA conference and assist training this weekend.
Thank you. And if they've arrived, yeah, now we move back to our presentations and delegations. Wasima, Jumun, you have the floor. All right.
We have your presentation.
Okay.
I'm not gonna question the Bobby up there. Oh, amazing. Perfect. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me come talk about CUSA and the work that we do. I don't know if you know anything about the organization and why I'm here and who I am, but that's my job and that's why I'm here to tell you. But just a little bit about me. My name is Wasima. I use she, elle pronoun. I actually live in Ottawa, just a couple of streets somewhere around there. I don't know direction. I was like, this is my first time on Carleton campus and I've lived here for a year, but I am the Member Relations Officer for the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations, also known as CUSA for short, but I'm not new to the student government world. Every year I say this is my last year. Every year I do it for another year. So I've been in it for about 6 years. I started as an international rep on my council, and then I was vice president student life, and then I was the executive director for the provincial organization in New Brunswick. I went to a very small school called St. Thomas University in New Brunswick, and came here as an international student as well, and keep on doing the work that we do. But I'm happy to be with CUSA for my second term now, and I'm here to kind of talk to you about the work that we do. You probably have heard about it, but if in case you have not, hopefully this presentation will educate you a little bit more, and then at the end I'll take any questions that you might have. So what we are looking to do today is what is CUSA, so a couple of our governing documents and structure. What do we really do as an organization? A couple of records of our success. What a year at CUSA would look like, and what does this all mean for your association and also for your students. So at a glance, if someone were to ask me what the organization is, this is the slide I will present. We represent about 365,000 students across the country. We have 25 member schools. We actually just approved our newest member, Trent Student Association in Ontario, just 2 weeks ago. We have 7 elected board members that's elected by the membership at the first meeting of the members, and we operate on a 1 board per school. So our mission, I would say, kind of like similar to like your organization itself. We are a member-driven structure and grassroots approach. So our mission is to advocate for students using policy development, research, awareness campaign, and partnership with stakeholders. And again, I'll get the hang of it by the end of this. Perfect. And our vision, just like your association as well, I would assume internally is we want to have an accessible, affordable, innovative, and high quality education for all students across the country, regardless of what background they're coming from. So these are our 6 values that I, as a staff, kind of put on our day-to-day operation, but also as members or observers or anyone engaging with the organization kind of have to abide by, but also kind of how we operate as an organization is like why the organization was kind of created as well was through those values. So we're non-partisan. So whoever is in power, whichever government, we will advocate for students because we believe that pushing the student agenda is our main goal, regardless of who is in power and whoever is willing to listen to us. We are member driven. As I like to say, I'm a staff. It's the students who tell me what to do. The students pay me to be in this position I am. So whatever they kind of give the direction of the organization to be, that's how we kind of take it on. Very research based. So we believe that if we are presenting anything to government, we want it to be very honed into research, especially coming from a younger demographic where very often our voice can be kind of like unheard, but when we have big data and like research backing what we are presenting to decision-making table, they tend to take us more seriously. We operate on an easy in, easy out kind of principle. So that was like kind of the main reason to why CUSA was created as an organization is whoever is around the table or active participant, they want to be here. They see the benefit for them and their students. So it's as easy to get into the organization. You just send a letter and express your interest, and then the board approves it, and then the membership approve it, and it's just as easy to leave. You just give us 120 days notice before the fiscal year ends, and you just tell us this is no longer for us, and you kind of leave, and you have a 1 year break in between, and then you're able to come back, whatever, if that fits more into your mandate or what your student is looking. So very much a simple process because we believe in autonomy and giving it back to the students to kind of make decision for what's best for your students. Transparency, the reason to why I gave this presentation and my role was kind of created is like I traveled to different campuses across the country to just give this presentation and kind of put a name to a face, but also for you to ask questions directly. It's not just the CUSA delegates or like the president or the VP advocacy interacting with the organization, but you as a council as well are able to ask the questions and answers. And we also have our website. You can go on our website and should be most up to date. We try to make sure that everything is on there, our budget, our membership fee, our meeting minutes, anything that you would like to see. And we operate on a 1 board per institution campus. Per institution policy is because we represent student association who have about 2,000 students, but also 20,000 students. So how do we create that equilibrium and that equitable voice around the table is by having a 1 board per institution principle. So these are our current members that we have. Every time I make this slide, we have a new member. I have to somehow make it look aesthetically pleasing, and it takes longer than I would like to admit, but we make it work. But these are our current observers that we have. So from last year, when I started this role, we only had 2 observers. Now we are about, I think, 10 or 11. As you can see, a lot of Ontario schools are coming back around the table. It's because the way CUSA has been operating has changed and evolved, and the interest has been there. But what is observership is I classify it as a 2-year free Netflix trial, but I think with Netflix changing policy, I don't know how accurate this reference is anymore, but basically CUSA is able to come to CUSA conference and observe the work that we do, get to participate in these conferences, participate in consultation, participate in our advocacy week where you get to meet with parliamentarians, free of cost. So you get to do that for a maximum of 2 years. You can decide to join as a member anytime in between those 2 years or to leave at any time during that time as well. But this is just kind of giving you a taste of what CUSA is like before you put your whole funding into the organization, because I think it does matter for you to kind of see how we operate before you decide to commit, especially a big organization like CUSA and Carlton, about 30,000 students. That's big money coming in, so we just want you to be able to observe the work before we go there. For transparency reason, this is our membership fee structure. So it kind of has a top-down model just to, again, create that equitable voice around the table. And again, it was created and approved by membership a couple of years ago. I think this was 2018, 2019, so very recent. And it's kind of like reviewed every year. If someone is like, we don't agree with that, they bring it to membership and they kind of debate and see if it passes or not. But we also have a maximum and a minimum associated. So no big school would be paying more than like 60,000, and that's give or take with the inflation as well. But that kind of ensures if you're representing 100,000 of students, you're still paying 60,000. So and then for smaller school as well, if they are representing 2 students, they still pay about $6,000. But that's kind of how we break down the fees to make sure that it's kind of equitable for all size of institution. So a little bit about our governing documents. So I would say just like your organization as well, we operate on the Nonprofit Corporations Act. We also have a bylaw that's reviewed and renewed, reviewed every year just by the membership. We have a committee that works specifically on reviewing our internal documents. Again, that's coming from students across the country, just to ensure that the student needs are being met, but created by the students. We have an internal strategy plan that's coming to an end at the end of this academic year. So we're currently using this year for a lot of strategy planning as well. But it's a 3-year strategy plan to ensure that we are not recreating the wheel every year, but also we are able to adapt to the changes of student needs. And we have our operating procedures, which is more on like the day-to-day running of the organization. So our fees, how our committees work, how our structure work, what is the role of the staffs. And that again is where there is a mandate to review all of them every 3 years. But they tend to be done every year because of how it kind of rolls about. But every year you have to review about 6 of them. That's kind of like a mandate in there as well. So yeah, those are the documents and how we are kept accountable. Those are our 5 strategic pillars. Membership. The organization doesn't exist if we don't have students around the table. So definitely a big pillar of ensuring that members are getting the information that they need, recruiting new members around the table, but also retaining old one. That's why my position exists in Silo, is to ensure that everyone on the table feels heard and seen, and any concern that they might have to kind of like address that. Advocacy, we're a federal advocacy group. So of course, our main goal is to be able to bring policies and research to decision-making table to make changes to change the life of the secondary education students. As I mentioned, policy and research. So very much anything that we present to the government has been worked and researched by students. Public relations. So we're seen as like one big stakeholder for secondary education. So very often media will reach out to us and like, what are your thoughts? What are the student voice around this issue? And very often CUSA is asked to comment on that. And governance, just ensuring that the organization is not falling apart in short term, but just ensuring that it's being meeting the needs of the membership and the students across the country. So our structure is kind of like similar to this. So the membership, so all the student association, be it members and observers, kind of fall at the top of the hierarchy, if you will. And then they appoint 2 students to come to CUSA and represent CUSA on behalf of the association. For instance, for CUSA, it usually tends to be the president and the vice president external or advocacy, whoever portfolio falls under. And then the general assembly is made of 1 person of the 2 delegates to be the voting member of the for your organization. They elect the board of directors, so the whole membership on the first day, on the first conference, elect the board of directors. And then each board of directors chairs one of the 8 committees that we have, which we can go a little bit more into details later. But again, it kind of shows that it is the student that's choosing the leadership of the organization. And then the board of directors work really closely with the executive director. So they meet every 2 weeks to just run the organization. Any expenses that we need to meet to make goes through the board. Any big decision goes through the board as well, just to ensure it's very member driven. And then the executive director works really closely with the home office staff, including me and the 3 other staff we have at home office. And these are the board position we have. So we have the chair, which kind of is the spokesperson of the organization and is very much asked to present to committees at parliament and kind of like is the voice of the organization. The treasurer and secretary pretty is self-explanatory. Director of policy just make sure that all our policies are being up to date with student needs. Director of advocacy planning a national campaign every year is kind of like the main mandate. Director of membership, usually they accompany me with for this presentation, but we just elected our director of membership like 2 weeks ago. But usually I have a board member present with me as well to bring that student perspective. And then a director of EDI, which I think is pretty self-explanatory, working on equity, diversity, and inclusion initiative. So what do we mean by member driven? Again, a membership is comprised of the primary and secondary delegate, as I mentioned. They are responsible for representing your students, the students at Carleton campus at a national level. So by bringing stories that you hear or any struggle that you hear from your students, you share that with your primary and secondary delegate, and then they bring that when we are brainstorming about ideas or when they are meeting with politicians, they're like, this is what's happening on my campus. So that's a way of bringing your voice and the voice of your student to national level. Reviewing and assessing CUSA's action plan. So at every conference, we provide presentation on the financial, on any improvement or any work we're doing, just to be held accountable for the work. Ensuring compliance with the governing documents, so they can hold the staff and everyone around the table compliant to the governing documents that I mentioned earlier. They elect the CUSA's board and committee representative. Again, the leadership is not decided by me, but again by the students. Attend CUSA conferences to again bring your perspectives, as I mentioned, and meeting directly with MPs and politicians to be able to influence the decision-making process of the organization. So the board kind of has more of a hands-on like kind of mandate where they see CUSA's day-to-day operation. As I mentioned, any spending doesn't go without board approval. They create the annual action plan. So they will be going on a board retreat later in June, where they've had all the priorities of all our members at the foundations conference we had 2 weeks ago. And then they're going to take all of this and create an action plan and present it to our next conference in July and be like, this is what we heard from you. Is this what you want reflected for you and your students? And then we debate it at that conference, and then they approve that for the setting the direction and the priorities for the year. Ensuring it's member driven. So they connect with members on a regular basis outside of staff, just so that students feel like they're able to talk to another student about what they're experiencing at CUSA, and they get to chair committees, which I think committees is like where most of the work of the organization happens. Speaking of, so CUSA committees, again, as I mentioned, is like where most of the work happens. So when students go leave conference spaces, they go into committees and then they start working on any directions set by membership. So it's made up of delegates from members, but also observers pool that gets to sit down and observe the work that we do. They connect to a board of directors through a board representation, again, that liaison in that hierarchy. They're also responsible for developing work plan that they present at the policy and strategy, so that they are also held accountable on like what priorities they are putting forward for the academic year. And they are responsible for providing reports again at conferences, just to be held accountable for the work they've been doing. And so, as I mentioned, these are the 8 committees. Actually, now we have like a 9th committee. The 9th one is there's an election coming up sometime. So CUSA is responsible for having the Get Out the Vote campaign. So at Foundation, we striked an ad hoc committee, the 45th general election committee, just to plan around the campaign, but these are our standing committees that we have overall at CUSA. So I think they're pretty self-explanatory. So I'm going to go quickly over it, but if you have any more questions, happy to take them after. But Federal Policy Committee, they review and write new policies every year. So if there's a policy that you're passionate about, I know currently last year we had a delegate that was very passionate about sustainability and convinced membership that is something we should all care about. And now they're currently working on a policy on that, on sustainability and housing. National Advocacy Committee, as I mentioned, they kind of plan the annual campaign. So every year in January, February, CUSA launches a campaign to engage your student on your campus so that we get the grassroots approach. Governance and internal review committees, so those ones kind of review the internal and the governing documents of CUSA just to ensure that it's up to date. The EDI committee, I think, pretty self-explanatory, working on decolonizing the institution and making sure we are being inclusive of all. Member Relations Committee, they would describe themselves as the fun committee, but they put on events to ensure that members are connecting with one another regardless of regions, but also they work on member retention and member recruitment as well. The National Indigenous Advisory Committee that has recently turned into an advocacy committee is kind of different in a way where it's made up of Indigenous students from your campuses. So it doesn't have to be an elected student leader from your council, but it can be if they are Indigenous, but they get to sit on that committee and kind of come up with their own advocacy. Every year they go on a retreat, but they do their own advocacy work, but this is kind of to give them autonomy, but also give them the microphone to do a lot of advocacy work in terms of decolonizing the institution. Colleges and Polytechnic Advisory Groups. So we have and then the representation of colleges around the table. So having an advisory group to tell them how, for them to tell us how to better advocate for them is the best way we've seen to be able to represent them. And the same for graduate advisory committee as well. So made up of graduate students to advise us on the work that we do. So the staff, we have 5 staff, and the pretty cool thing is, like, if you look at the strategic pillars, we all fit into one of those strategic pillars. The executive director oversees the overall of the organization, the governance of it. Member relations, I'm responsible for membership, policy and research, kind of self-explanatory, there's a research of it. Government stakeholder relations, build relationship with our government officials, and then creative content officer does a lot of the work on our external facing documents and social media. We also have 2 summer interns this year that have just started last week. So it's the policy intern and then the communications intern as well. So we are growing as a team, which is nice, because when I started, the fun story is on my first meeting, they told me that they were all leaving and I was on staff for 2 weeks. And I was like, how am I supposed to run this organization? But we made it through. But now we're growing as a team. So what does CUSA really do now that I've talked about what we are? So if someone were to ask me again, what do we do as an organization? That's the slide I will pull up and say, in short, this is what we do, but going into more details. So going again into the policy and research papers. So an example I often use is when the pandemic hit, there was no research or no one was really looking at how the pandemic impacted students directly. And when the SUB program was going around and a lot of students were saying, we don't qualify for this, so you're leaving us behind the cracks. So CUSA started pulling up data and conducting research, and we're like, are students really impacted by that? And the numbers shows an alarming number of students were being impacted. And that's where we saw the creation of CESD and also the doubling of the student grant and also the freeze of the student loan during those years of the pandemic. So that kind of shows how directly from research we saw an outcome come out of it. And then we decided to, because mental health remained a priority for our membership and our students. So we released a report a year into the pandemic saying that students are still asking for support. They're still concerned about the financial stability being during the pandemic. And then the latest one we released was last summer, the new abnormal, kind of looking at student mental health 2 years into the pandemic. And we've seen that not only has the condition worsened, but there's new mental health issues that has arisen for students. And very often these reports are quoted by politicians and also stakeholders across the country, because that's the only data that's out there that looks specifically at students, but also different demographic of students as well. If you needed data about international student mental health during the pandemic, that report will kind of give you that, which I don't think is anywhere else. Oh, I didn't mean to do that, but you can see all our other policy research papers on our website as well, but every year we try to do a new paper to be written. Perfect. Lobby meetings, I would say that's like the biggest selling point for CUSA. I think that's when CUSA first got involved last year as well. But every year in November, we have delegates come from across the country to meet with politicians, stakeholders. And it is like one of the biggest lobby week we have in the country. Usually all other stakeholders, there's 1 or 2 days, but CUSA decides to go big or go home. For staff, it's kind of like a hard goal to put, but students really enjoy being able to meet with many stakeholders across in parliament and kind of like bring the student voice directly to the district table. So last year we met with about 130 plus people, and the board also got to meet with the Prime Minister as well. This is not me just flexing, but it just kind of shows the credibility that we have and the resources that we have, because a lot of the staff that work at CUSA or the past CUSA delegates end up working for a lot of the offices on Parliament. So we are able to just like pick up the phone and call them and be like, can we have a meeting? Can we discuss something about student issues? So I think this is like a relationship that's been built for like 25 plus years. And that's why when the Prime Minister, we thought he was going to meet for 5 minutes, ended up sitting down and talking to them for about 45 minutes because the relationship was built. And this is not the first time we've met with the Prime Minister. We've met with Prime Minister Harper and Justin Trudeau a couple of times as well. Parliamentary committees. So very often CUSA is asked to testify into the House of Commons or Senate committees about issues that impact post-secondary students. Over there you could see now not our current chair, his term ended last Friday, but Christian presenting to the Standing Committee of Science and Research. Very recently, our executive director presented to the Standing Committee of Science and Research, again, asking for more grant for graduate students. We had our Indigenous student representative presenting to the Standing Committee of Indigenous and Northern Affairs on more funding for Indigenous students. And we take this as a great honor and privilege again, because not often our expert witnesses that our students get to go into the House of Commons and present on issues that impact post-secondary students. Even though Christian did most of his online, but he still get to be on a big screen in the House of Commons. We also have a unique partnership with the Union Étudiante de Québec, the Quebec Student Union. The reason to why we have a partnership with them and not necessarily a membership is because the schooling system in Quebec works very differently. They don't qualify for any Canada Student Grant, and the way their schooling works is not the same as the Canadian schooling system. But by having this partnership, we are able to meet with Le Bloc as a party, because Le Bloc as a party will not meet with an organization that has Canadian in front of it. But we have a good sharing relationship where we share on a lot of policies and research and publications, and we get to attend their conferences and they get to attend ours as well. I kind of already went over this, but our National Indigenous Advocacy Committee, that's a committee that's looking to kind of like become more of this silo thing where they have a platform for Indigenous students to be able to advocate for them. This is like one of the very few where Indigenous students from across the country are able to come together and do work on that. So every year they go on a conference. This was them last year in BC at the Truth and Reconciliation Day ceremony at UBC, but they also get to attend CUSA's Advocacy Week and bring the Indigenous lens to all our advocacy directly to politicians and parliamentarians. As I mentioned, we also do a lot of campaigning as well. So these are a couple of our campaigns from a couple of years back. So during an election year, we have Get Out the Vote, but we've had one on mental health. The gap one was one online during the pandemic about finances for students. But our most recent one was the half year Canada Student Grant. So asking the government to keep the doubling of the student grant permanent for domestic students because the cost of going to university is more than the tuition. And with inflation, a lot of students have said that doubling the student grant from 3,000 to 6,000 really benefited them. And we just shared stories of students across the country about how that benefited them. So we're still continuing to meet with the government to ask for that, but this was a campaign that we released in February of this year. So a couple of records of success. So the lifting of international student working hours, recognizing we were not the only one advocating for that. A lot of stakeholders were advocating for that, but that's something and a policy that has been in CUSA's policy library for quite a while. And we've been meeting with ministers, the Minister of Immigration, the Parliamentary Secretary, and keep on asking for that. We are hearing from students that not only are they getting exploitative working hours, but they are not able to make ends meet, would not be able to work more than 20 hours. And in November of last year, we saw the announcement of a temporary lifting of their working hours, and now we're currently working on them with them to make this more of a permanent thing. Also, a fun fact about Minister Fraser is he used to be a past CUSA delegate, going back to how we have a big network of past student delegates who ends up taking those portfolios. So whenever we have an issue pertaining to immigration, we are able to just send an email to their office, and very often they are very receptive to meeting with our students. So here you can see Christian and our director of EDI kind of talking to the minister about the delay that was happening last year when it comes to international students coming to study here. Another one that I kind of wanted to highlight that shows a direct correlation is like the expansion of the definition of disability in the Canada Student Financial Assistance Program. On the right side, you can see that this was directly from a policy that a student had written years ago and has set in our policy library, and we kept on advocating for that. And then when the government announced that earlier last summer, they coded that directly from a CUSA policy paper. So a student who worked on that a couple of years ago can say one of their policies were approved, and it's pretty cool, I think. But it kind of shows how like the work that you're doing now doesn't have to come to fruition like right away, but it can build up over the years, and you can see it come to fruition afterwards. But that was a win that was celebrated by CUSA and also by the student who wrote this a couple of years ago. So these are a couple of the wins from the past 2 years. So we saw the elimination of interest on federal student loan. We saw the 9 billion COVID aid package for post-secondary students that included CESB, the freezing of interest on student loans, the doubling of the student grant, and we also saw a launch of the national standard on mental health and well-being for post-secondary students. And we're continuing advocating to the government on more funding for mental health for students. So what does a year of CUSA look like? So we just finished our foundations year, which is where all the student delegates meet one another and they kind of like brainstorm on priorities that they've been hearing on their campus. It's very much like, let's paint the big picture. How we describe it is, if there's any priorities that you don't achieve this year and will make you cry, what is that? And any priorities that you're like, it's okay if it doesn't get achieved, but it's still important. So a lot of brainstorming and ideation happened at that conference. And then in June, as I mentioned, the board kind of takes all these conversations, those job papers, and sit down in the college and just try to categorize them and put them in an action plan and work plan. And then in July, they come back together and discuss about those action plan and those priorities before voting and setting the direction for the year. In August, the Indigenous Student Conference happened. It's happening in Edmonton this year, where they get to decide their own advocacy for the year. In November, we have all our students come back for Advocacy Week, where they get to meet with politicians and parliamentarians directly and advocate for students. In January, we have a campaign execution, and then in March, we wrap up with the annual general meeting. So now that I've spoken for what feels like an eternity, what does that mean for you? Why CUSA? You get to represent your student at a national level in Ottawa, and also the fact that you are in Ottawa really makes it like a low cost benefit in a way that you don't have to travel for 2 other conferences as well. And you're able to use the resources with the fact that home office is literally right there. So definitely a good win that I don't think a lot of the other campus kind of have. You get to attend CUSA conferences and also take on leadership role, be it on the board, be it a voting member on committees, or just a vice chair role, or if you have a policy that you're interested in and think that should make it to the policy library at CUSA, this is where you can do that. You get to participate in CUSA committees and working groups. So in between conferences, we also have consultation groups and conversation with our members, just to make sure we are very member driven. So you get to attend that as members, but also as observers. Advanced stakeholder relations, which I think is again another big selling point. So you're able to focus on your internal operation of the organization, knowing that CUSA is kind of doing the work at the back end. And again, as I mentioned, we are in Ottawa, so you're able to connect with us more closely and directly. You get access to professional training, advocacy resources, and student union networks. I think during the pandemic year, the student union networks is something that was really missing at CUSA, and a lot of students found the benefit of it. Because very often the students are the only one who knows what you do. My mom still doesn't know what I do for a living. I've been doing it for 6 years, but she's like, what do you do again? You work for the university. I was like, actually the opposite, but you're able to build connection with student union people across the country that kind of have the same thoughts and beliefs and issues that you have. And as I said, member driven and easy in, easy out. So you get to decide how much you want to engage with the organization. I'm just here to provide you the information, not to convince you to join. It would be nice to have you on the table, but again, you get to make the decision and you get to decide how you would like to engage with CUSA. And that is it for me.
So just for clarification for council and from you, I know you explained a bit about the observership period of 2 years. But maybe you can kind of confirm what that would look like for us at CUSA, and then what would happen at the expiration of that 2-year observership.
Great question. So you will vote on it as a council and decide whether you join or not. A letter will be sent at the next board meeting. It will be approved or denied, most likely approved. And then we will start onboarding. So you have a meeting call with me where I'll onboard you and put you on all the communication platform and software we have. And then now we kind of consider you as like members, potential members as well. So now you will be included in all our member updates that we send every week to like engage with the organization. You get to attend CUSA conferences at a cost of $100 per delegates for any of the conference fee, but you're more than welcome to attend that. And we are currently building up our committees for the year as well. So I will send you those information. If there's any committees that you are interested in sitting, you are able to kind of have that out there. And I feel like council members, for instance, if you have a member that's very interested in like EDI and they could benefit from like sitting on the EDI committee, I would sign them in there and they will be observer on that committee and still be able to see the work that we do. So you will run through the year and kind of see what CUSA is like. You'll come to Advo Week as well. And then at the end of the expiry date, we will follow up and either you could put in and ask to become a member, or if you're like, we were happy to be here, but I don't think this is for us, we will bid adieu. And then you have another 1-year break until if the next council in 2 years time decide to join again, they're able to do that again. But that's kind of the rundown. And also wanted to highlight how you pay your fee is up to you. CUSA doesn't determine whether you take it from students directly, you take it from your operating procedure, that's up to you. Some schools run referendum on whether they can join the organization as a member or they need to pay the fee. So that's really up to you and we are happy to facilitate that. For our current members that kind of joined, we went and did briefing on their campus for a couple of days just to bring that information out there to their students. But that's kind of like the rundown of how observership will kind of go over the year and what the next step would be. I hope that answered the question.
And then I just have one last question, just to confirm for everyone, the 2-year observership period is totally free of cost. Correct?
Yes, so you will not pay the 60,000 members that I put on there, but you will be paying for like your travel costs and accommodation costs for conferences. Our members also pay that. And that's why we give the dates and the location a year in advance so that we can book them cheap of cost. And again, for CUSA, you're based in Ottawa, so you won't pay for foundations and for Advo Week, so you're cutting on that cost, and you pay $100 fee to attend the conferences. But the $60,000 membership fee, you won't have to pay for that for 2 years. That's why we have observership for only 2 years, because it's coming at the expense of the members that's paying the fee. That's why we kind of have a cut-off point, and then we ask for a year in between before you decide to join as observer.
All right, thank you so much. I
Thanks.
don't have any further questions. Are there any questions on Zoom?
Any questions from the counselors on Zoom?
If you have any questions after, feel free to email me as well.
All right. Just give me a second. All right, so for now, we can just take a 5-minute recess or maybe 10 minutes. Yeah, so we'll just like meet again at 7:46. Yeah.
Great.
All right, everyone, we are back. Do we have to check for quorum again? Or,
We don't talk about it. No one asked it.
do we talk about it now?
I'm not asking.
My goodness. Okay, so now we're moving on to Chair of the Board, S. Harris. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me in the room. Solid, I see some thumbs up. Okay, perfect. Hope you're all doing well as we round off the first month of the summer semester. Whether you're doing summer classes, find yourself immersed in a co-op position, trudging through a summer job, or counting specks of dust that gather on your windowsill. I'm happy to be here with you virtually, live from Montreal, to give a quick update on the operations of the Board of Directors. Now, for those of you who are new to CUSA and the structure of the corporation, I can understand that the boundaries of CUSA Council and the Board of Directors might be a little bit blurry or unclear at first, even if you voted to approve our tenures at the annual general meeting back in March. That's completely okay, especially since the concept of the board is still relatively new. So to make a very long story short, just as a quick update, the CUSA board was established after a series of governance changes brought out by the Democratic Reform Committee's recommendations last year to streamline operations, improve accountability of each actor in the association, to depoliticize legal and financial activities of the association, and to be in compliance with provincial law. Therefore, you can imagine that our job is pretty simple. We oversee CUSA Inc. in accordance with provincial law and applicable policies. So we secure the long-term future of CUSA while managing resource allocation and ensuring due process in business operations. Every year, the first meeting of the Board of Directors post AGM, our board is tasked with electing a series of presiding officers and ceremoniously delegating responsibility to certain employees of the corporation. This year, I, Simon Harris, will be serving as chair of the Board of Directors, and my colleague, Carl Alari, will be the vice chair of the Board of Directors. You both have experience being directors of the board in the previous year, and we are looking forward to working with you folks on some of the honestly quite numerous jointly delegated tasks that we have to do together. You'll notice over the course of the year as well that things at the board tend to move pretty quickly. The past 2 months have certainly been no exception. Since council last met in March, we have passed, give or take, 32 motions. I won't go through them all one by one because that is both tedious and unproductive, but I will point out a few for information. At the 11th meeting of the CUSA board, we approved signing authorities for the association and passed a list of officers for the corporation, which includes the names that you provided from AGM, such as vice presidents and the board members, as well as some senior staff. We also struck and filled all of our standing committees and nominated Director Jajo Yakub to serve on the joint board nominating committee, which you folks will have to fill on your side as well. The Board of Directors approved a proposal from President Faris to create 9 associate vice president positions, which will report to the vice presidents and utilize the support of select members of senior staff. The goal of this proposal is to ameliorate some stress points from the executive and to ensure some smoother operations within the CUSA offices. Also to flag is the approval of an extension of the contract for the chief returning officer. The board thanks Connor Plant, the current CEO, for expressing interest in supporting the operations of our elections for an additional year, and we look forward to another set of smooth and professionally run elections. Lastly, the board amended the hiring policy and procedure to add a manager of charitable initiatives to the organizational chart. That's all from the board at this time. As we pled last year, and as we ask you to consider this year, please take our proverbial olive branch that we are extending right now to work together for another successful year driving the association. To pull a phrase that I often said as a teaching assistant during my econ tutorials, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, grievances, accolades, whatever it may be, do not hesitate to reach out to me. I can be reached at the following email, and I'll put it in the chat as well. boardchair@cusaonline.ca. If for whatever reason I am on leave, hopefully that doesn't have to happen this year, you can also reach out to the vice chair, Carl Olari, at vicechair@cusaonline.ca. We also invite you to come and sit in on the next or any board meeting if you so wish. All board meetings are broadcasted and open to the public. If you are interested in sitting in on the June 11th meeting, drop me a line and I'd be happy to send you the details over email. Looking forward to eventually meeting you all in person soon.
All right, thank you so much. And then we move on to agenda item 9, our external reports. So starting with the Rideau River Residents Association.
Hey everyone, my name is Bernard Deasley and I'm the Rideau River Residents Association president. So for the past 1 month, we've been working on transitioning and just creating our plan for the next few months. And with that, one of the first things we're going to work with this year is the bike sharing program on residents. And aside from that, we're also going to be working on delivery program for our convenience store and also bringing back the residents formal, which hasn't happened in the last few years. With those, we're right now working on them, and once the plans are concretized, we'll look forward to a lot of collaboration with other student leaders on campus. With that being said, I congratulate all the student leaders elected in the past 2 months, and yeah, we look forward to a lot of collaboration. Thank you.
Do we have? For just. Perfect. We have none from our other members. Can we move to council reports? So starting with the Faculty of Public Affairs, do we have any reports? Okay.
Just ask her.
Yeah. We can just have any reports if there are any. You can feel free to speak from any of the faculty. If there are any. All right, seeing as there are none, we will move on to our announcements and correspondence. And for that, we'll have VP Internal take the floor for that.
So I'm just going to run everyone through our CUSA Council training plan. So every year, CUSA Council does training. We do a lot of things for training. We look at Robert's Rules of Order. We look at committee placements. We look at how committees function, how council functions, how everyone can be effective council members. So that's something this year, our proposed dates are the weekend of June 24th and 25th. It'll be a 2-day affair. And you can see here kind of the schedule that I've outlined with some of the senior staff in the organization. So this council training plan is subject to the approval of all of you councilors. So we'll vote on a motion shortly after it's kind of explained. And with the approval of council, we'll then be able to execute this training plan in June. So the first day here, Saturday, councilors can see it online, hopefully through screen share. Saturday will mostly be training sessions. So we have kind of introductions to CUSA. We're hoping to get in various external trainers to explain Robert's Rules of Order, to explain more in depth about what a not-for-profit corporation is and how that affects CUSA and how we govern under that legislation. As well, we're hoping to have committee placements ready for the training on the Saturday. So we'll go through some committee case studies. For example, if you're a member of the Finance Committee, we'll do a case study that'll be led by some of our senior members, full-time staff at the CUSA team, to kind of get folks integrated into committees to know how the committees work and how they can be effective in reviewing and proposing legislation to council. Same thing as we move into the afternoon of Saturday, it'll be a mock agenda committee. So for those of you who don't know, the agenda committee is comprised of 3 members. Myself as the VP Internal, the speaker and the deputy speaker. And essentially the agenda committee meets before council meetings to set the agenda for the meeting. So we'll kind of do a mock agenda committee meeting, so that councilors kind of have insight into how the agenda process works and how things get to come before council. And we'll use all of our mock committee motions we did previously in the day for that agenda committee meeting. And then to finish off Saturday, a mock council meeting to adopt the motions that the mock stances we did in committees. And to finish it off, we're hoping to do Saturday evening, a really good social where counselors who are here in Ottawa can kind of socialize with members of the CUSA executive, with members of CUSA staff. And we're hoping to do that either here at Carleton or somewhere off campus. And then Sunday, we are hoping to move our monthly council meeting in June. We're hoping to move it to the Sunday, so that Sunday morning when we come back for council training, we have our council meeting right off the bat at 10:30 a.m. And then to move into our inaugural committee meetings of the year that Sunday afternoon, where we'll elect all the officers of committees, so the chair, the vice chair, and the reporting secretaries for the committees. I will note there are a lot of counselors that are at home, that are outside of Ottawa, so all of these sessions, with the exception of the 7 p.m. social on Saturday night, will be held hybrid, so there will be virtual sessions that everyone who's at home currently can join. So there's no worries if you're not in Ottawa, don't worry, you can still participate in council training and of course participate in the council meeting. So other than that, that's kind of the council training plan we have formatted as of now. We're open to feedback, of course, if anyone has any feedback, any recommendations for changes, please let me know. Otherwise, I think through the speaker, we'll go into a motion to approve this council training plan, and then also a motion that I'll propose to cancel our July and August council meetings, just because we have a pretty intensive training plan here in June. And a lot of people are on vacation, they're doing other things during the summer, so it'd be good to remove those two council meetings when really not a lot has gotten done in the past, and it's kind of a hassle to have everyone here. And then to just start with a nice big September council meeting when everyone's back in person. So we'll see when we get back to coaches.
All right, now we move on to our question period. Any questions from anyone, please? On Zoom, are there any questions? Okay, seeing as there are none, we move on to our unfinished business. There is none, and now on to the new business. So the motion, yeah.
So you're gonna do a motion that to approve the council.
Okay, but like this,
Yeah. Please.
want me to just jump right to that one? Which one is it? Repeal, replace. Okay, so now we just move on to the motion to approve this council training. I need someone to second it and to move it. So starting with the mover. Yes.
Michael.
Okay, Michael will move it, and the seconder. Okay, thank you. So that means it has been approved.
And then a motion to cancel the July and August council.
Okay, and then now we move to the motion to cancel the July and August council meetings in order to have a big one in September. Someone to move it and someone to second, please. Yeah, your name, please.
Mark Anthony.
Okay, mover is Mark Anthony and second Eddie. All right.
And then we should do the votes to just by show of hands.
Okay, and then we'll move on to a vote. So by show of hands, please, can we have those that agree? Yeah. One, two.
I'll just clarify for the first one, do the council training.
Oh, so we do two votes?
Yeah.
Okay, so for the first motion of approving the training, we'll have a vote. So show of hands for those that agree. Yeah, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'll go in favor.
Okay, fine. And then on Zoom, how many are voting in favor? Oh, I can do it on Zoom.
4 or 5.
Thank you, guys.
All right, that sounds approved. And then, and then for the second part of canceling our council meetings for July and August, can we have a show of hands for those that are in favor? Yes, and those on Zoom, please. All right. And those. Okay, it seems almost like unanimous there. Okay. Yep. Perfect, that is through. Now we move on to our motion to join the Canadian, no,
So the second item on the business for items of information. Which is close oversight.
I can't see that. Is it still in announcements and correspondence?
And
Okay, perfect, yeah. Sorry about that, guys. So now we move on to our nomination and appointment to the club's oversight commission.
Okay, so I'll just speak real quick to what that would look like to be a member of council, the club's oversight commission, and hopefully there'll be some folks who will be able to self-nominate themselves if they're interested. So the club's oversight commission, for those of you who don't know, is essentially the commission of CUSA that governs all of our clubs here at Carleton. So the club's oversight commission deals with certification, recertification, all of the funding that clubs receive. As well, they deal with complaints that club receives about funding, about our procedures. So it's a really great way as a member of club's oversight to get to know the club's process and to have a really big effect on the community at Carleton and how clubs operate. So as a member of club's oversight, you would be meeting, typically it's monthly, one meeting a month, Wednesdays at 5:30. And essentially during these 1 hour meetings, it's chaired by our student groups administrator and Wing. There are many members, delegates from clubs that are a member of the commission, along with a couple executives here at CUSA. And what we do is we just discuss issues of clubs, we discuss certification, recertification, and we discuss funding and delegate that into clubs and deal with all of our clubs oversight procedures. So it's a little heavy right now because we're in the period of the year where we're doing our certification of clubs, where we're dealing with summer funding for clubs. So as of right now, in May and June, it is a weekly thing, a 1 hour a week, every Wednesday in June. And then during the school year, your time commitment goes way down. It typically becomes a 1 hour, usually at most 2 hours a month commitment to be a member of clubs oversight. So as council, council needs to appoint one member in accordance with our bylaws to be a member of the club's oversight commission and to serve on the club's oversight commission as council's representative and participate in the process of the certification, recertification, funding, and the complaints process. So with that, I hope there's someone who will self-nominate themselves, someone who's experienced with clubs, interested in learning more about CUSA and about how our club's procedures work. And then after that, hopefully, we'll move into a motion to approve.
All right, so anyone to self-nominate for the position, please speak now. It's gonna be great, so anyone.
Point of information. Could the
Yes, go ahead.
VPI, thank you, could the VPI just repeat what the summer commitment would be?
Yeah, so the summer commitment is a little heavier, just because there's a lot of work to be done on clubs oversight right now with recertification, certification, and approving summer funding to clubs. So especially during the month of June, it's a commitment of 1 hour a week. We meet every Wednesday at 5:30. As the summer progresses, the commitment decreases. And then eventually come September, October, and throughout the rest of the academic year, the commitment is not as much. It's 1 or 2 meetings per month, still on Wednesdays, or, it can be changed to accommodate schedules.
Follow-up point of information. Is deputy speaker allowed to nominate themselves, or is that a conflict of interest? I'm not sure if being the counselor on the oversight committee is considered an office.
I don't think so. I've read nothing that says, you're still a counselor.
Yeah.
You're not serving as speaker, deputy speaker role is only when the speaker is not available to chair a meeting. So no.
Okay. Well, if no one else is gonna nominate themselves, I guess I will.
I think he will make a great chair of and yes.
All right, so now do we vote on it?
So we'll do a motion that council appoints Aiden Rowland to the club's oversight commission and then we move forward.
Okay, so now we move on to a motion to nominate Deputy Speaker Aiden to be the chair for our club's oversight commission. I would need someone,
Just,
oh, no,
just a minute.
just a member, yeah. So I need someone to move it. Yes, Michael?
Right.
And a seconder. Okay, thank you, Councillor Zabro. Okay, be it resolved then that Aiden is a member to the club's oversight commission. Congratulations. Oh, then we vote. So with the show of hands. Okay, so show of hands for those in favor of this nomination, please. Sweeping, stunning. All right. Okay, be it resolved then that Aiden is a member on the club's oversight commission. Congratulations. And okay, now we move on to the motion, right? Okay, perfect. So now we move on to motions of new business. So the motion to join CUSA, so the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations. So whereas advocacy is a core component of CUSA's mandate, and whereas the executive wishes to increase its advocacy efforts to all levels of government, and whereas CASA offers a 2-year observer period at no cost to student unions wishing to consider formal membership in CASA, and whereas the Executive Council approved sending a letter of intent to CASA indicating CUSA's desire to participate in their offering of a 2-year observer period, be it resolved that CUSA send a letter of intent to CASA indicating CUSA's desire to participate in their offering of a 2-year observer period, and be it further resolved that Council appoints the President and VP Student Issues to serve as CUSA's primary representatives to CASA pursuant to Section 10 of the External Relations Policy G11. Right? Yeah, so we'll have the flow for discussions. President, you may begin.
Okay, so I'll first start off with the fact that part of the reason why we came to this point is that we have acknowledged that CUSA lacks any participation in any advocacy levels within the government. And we saw from our partners across the country that CASA has been a wonderful avenue. I participated in CASA's advocacy week as a guest last November, and we saw that there was a lot of benefit from getting into those rooms with decision makers, and I was part of the question period. We went to House of Commons for, and one of the MPs even mentioned CASA delegate by name and about the initiative that they want. So I find it is a very good opportunity for CUSA to diversify its advocacy levels within the federal government. And as Wasima mentioned, is that we're able to sort of have that sort of give that opportunity for CASA to build that relationship for us, and we're going there to just enhance it and bring that student voice that is more relevant to the Carleton campus. And when it comes to the monetary benefit, as we ask the questions, there's no particular worry about it in doing this observer membership. The CUSA Council from 2 years from now would then decide what CUSA's position would be, if we would want to go to referendum or what the status would be. But in the end, every year, the delegation that will be sent to CASA, so this year and the next year, will present a report to a CUSA Council about what they have learned, the outcomes of the conference, or the participation that they received, and how, if it's beneficial for CUSA or not after the end of the observership. So on that, I would recommend Council to vote in favor of this motion for CUSA to participate in, to be a member, to be an observer member at CASA. Thank you.
All right, any additional remarks from anyone? The floor is still open for discussion. All right.
Sorry, Madam Speaker, I just want to add something as well.
Yeah.
So another question or some concern might come for students or for counselors is I would like to bring to aware of the council is that CUSA is also part of the Canadian Federation for Students, which is also a federal advocacy group. We are a full member in the group, but we have realized, obviously, from the past year and the years prior to that, is that CFS is not a federal advocacy group that we have belief in, to say released. And we have seen that there's a lot of groundbreaking work that CUSA has done within the federal advocacy group. It's more of a challenging step towards achieving those goals. So in terms of that, we have been assured that being an observer membership would not be accounted to any dual sort of membership between CFS and CASA, as there are other schools that also have other membership, like the University of Manitoba Student Union and University of Toronto Student Union, that are both dual members, UTSU and UMSU. So.
All right, I will have Michael and then Aiden.
Yeah, I just have a question. So in that case, would it be the council's position in a sense over the long run to withdraw from CFS and just be part of the CAFA, and how would we go about doing that? Sure, yeah, or anyone can ask.
So I guess, yes, that's compliant to what this CUSA council wishes, about how they would want to take a stance on the within the CFS. But we think this is like a stepping forward, where we're looking for alternatives to the work or the advocacy work the CFS claims that it does. So yes, that is. Thank you.
And from Zoom, we'll have Aiden, you may unmute.
Sure. So I'll speak to support this motion. I echo a lot of the statements of the president, but I'll take a different approach in the case that we don't really have much to lose. We are purely becoming an observer member. I mean, I believe we're not paying the full membership fee, correct? So in this case, I mean, why not give it a shot? If it doesn't work out and we see that it's not something for us, we don't have to commit to it, and council down the line can make that decision. But I think it's a good avenue that we definitely can explore, and there's no harm in us, joining this organization as an observer to see if it's something we're really a part of, and just exploring it as an opportunity. And if it's great, fantastic. And if not, we haven't really dedicated too much to it, so we don't have to double down. So I think it's an opportunity for us to explore something that could come up, and we don't really have much to lose. So I encourage councillors to support this motion just to see what happens.
Any more comments from anyone? All right, seeing as there are none, we will move to a vote. With a show of hands, can we please have those that are in favor? I will be tallying them, so keep your hands up that I count. All right, and those against? Just please, okay, so those against, please raise your hands now. So like if you, okay. Am I right in assuming that's no one? Okay. We have 17 in favor, all right. Yeah. So as the yeas have it, this has been approved. We need someone to move this and second, or is it already? Yeah, okay. Moving on to our next motion to repeal and replace the committee's policy CO7. So whereas committees in the previous council session met infrequently and participated little in the policy process, and whereas committees lacked in membership both from councillors and students at large, it resolves that the current committee policy be repealed and replaced with a new, oh my God, committee's policy, which does the following: remove standing subcommittees and leave constituting subcommittees to the discretion of the relevant standing committee, reform certain standing committees and make associated edits to their mandate letters, create a more detailed and fair committee placement process, require that each councillor must be a member of at least one standing committee, and remove the requirements for students at large for voting members. Extra text in a link there. Anyone has access to it. Yeah, may I have it moved by, okay, it's been moved. May I just have a seconder for this motion? Also Kiana, yeah, also Kiana on Zoom. Now we open the floor to discussions. Yes, PI.
So I'd like to speak to this motion primarily because I'm the one who wrote the reform of the committee's policy. So I'll start by clarifying, while it does say repeal and replace, that's simply just a formality that has made it easier than going through the entire current committee's policy and striking out a whole bunch and then amending a whole bunch. If you look at the document that's linked in the agenda, you'll notice that the new committee's policy that I'm proposing here is very, very similar to the previous one. And I'll just highlight real quickly some of the changes, and then of course, if anyone has any questions about them. So the largest change is that last year there were numerous standing subcommittees under the standing regular committees of council. So the primary thing that this reform does to the committee's policy is remove the standing subcommittees. We saw last year that standing committees alone just did not meet that frequently, and with standing committees not meeting frequently, neither did subcommittees meet. So I'll just highlight here that while certain subcommittees are no longer standing, they're no longer required to be constituted by CUSA council, they of course can still be constituted whenever at the discretion of the standing committee. So for example, typically there is a subcommittee to administer the academic resilience fund and the student initiative fund under the finance and fees standing committee. That is something that standing committee can do by a vote, is constitute that subcommittee. So I'll just highlight there that subcommittees are not gone. The constitution of them just goes to the standing. Secondly, I will highlight some of the name changes and various changes in the terms of reference of these standing committees. So you'll notice that two names have changed. So student issues have become university affairs, and community engagement renamed possibly to external affairs. What this is doing is just better formulating the name of the committee to actually reflect what that standing committee does. University affairs, in the current committee's policy, student issues has always dealt with advocacy positions of CUSA, the political positions of CUSA, anything to do with accessibility concerns or affairs of the university with academic concerns. That's always been what that student issues committee has done. By branding it the university affairs committee, we're hoping that it's going to make it a little easier for council and students at large at Carleton to recognize what that committee actually does. And the same goes for the current community engagement committee being renamed to the external affairs committee. Largely the terms of reference are very similar in that community engagement has always dealt with external advocacy, for example, the CFS, partnerships in the community. It would deal with advocacy to CUSA, anything to do with community outreach or external organizations. So those are the primarily two rebrandings of the council terms of reference. And if you look at the agenda committee, the finance committee, the student life committee, board nominations, and of course the long-term strategic plan proposed standing committee, the terms of reference are very, very, very similar with very few changes. I'll also detail really quickly what this committee policy does is it proposes a more detailed and fair committee placement process. So essentially, last year, it was a little messy in that councilors were attempting to submit their desire to join a particular committee, and then there was some political jockeying into who got into what committee. What this policy outlines specifically is a clear, fair, and equitable process for councilors who want to join a committee. It'll make it mandatory that every councilor must be a participant in at least one. So one at minimum standing committee, and that what I'm trying to do there is to ensure that committees are actually being filled, and hopefully with standing committees being filled, standing committees will meet more frequently and actually be involved in the policy process of the executive and with council. Briefly outlining the committee selection process, it would be an application form that's freely distributed to councilors, in which councilors can rank first, second, third, fourth choice in terms of the committee they would like to be on. Then myself and the agenda committee, again, the speaker and the deputy speaker, would look at that application and attempt to fit everyone into at least their first or second choice to fill up committees that way. And of course, as per our council rules of procedure, any committee placement will be subject to the approval of council in our June council meeting. And lastly, I'll just add that another major thing that this committee policy replacement would do is remove the the requirement for students at large who are voting members of the committee. We saw in the last few years that there were massive issues in attempting to recruit students at large to be voting members of these committees. So by removing that requirement that students at large are voting members, and I'll add that students at large are always welcome to join committees. Committee meetings are public to anyone, any student, and they're able to come to join and to have their votes heard. There just will no longer be a student at large that is a select voting member of that committee. And that decision came from a lot of consultation with community stakeholders and with full-time staff, senior staff here at CUSA, who essentially outlined that this is not something that we've been able to fill, these student at large positions. And it's something that has been really bogging down the composition and the filling of seats in these committees. So I'll just highlight that. And of course, there is no change to the club's oversight. A student at large will remain on the club's oversight commission. So I'm happy to take any questions. I know it's a bit of a longer document. I hope everyone has a chance to at least skim the document. I'm really excited about the opportunities that this committee policy will bring. I'm really hopeful that we will be able to have committees that are more actively engaged with CUSA, committees that are actually meeting once every 6 weeks, that are being the first stamps, that are reviewing legislation before it even comes to council, and that they're having a more active process in holding the executive accountable through these committees and by looking at issues that are important to the Carleton community, looking at international student concerns, Indigenous concerns, accessibility concerns. So I'm really hopeful by revamping this committee process, we're able to have a much more active CUSA council and a lot better formation of standing committees.
Yes, so we'll start with, I don't know which one came first, but from what I can see, Aiden and then followed by someone.
So I want to start by just thanking the VPI for their initiative. It's a good written policy. There's some elements that I really do appreciate. I just have two big concerns off the top of my head, and it's the reason why I most likely be moving to table this for another time. And it's that this policy, along with many other joint policies between the board and council, are supposed to be reviewed every couple of years. And this year, the committee policy is supposed to be properly reviewed by council. And this is supposed to take place as a review within the Constitution and Policy Review Committee. So my concern here is that we'd be implementing a policy before properly studying it in committee and properly discussing as councilors the changes that we want to see fit. And a larger concern I see is that this policy actually removed the Constitution and Policy Review Committee as a standing committee, whose one of its main jobs would be to review committees or review policies just like this. So I appreciate the thought and the effort that went into this. And I feel like there's many good elements, but I feel like right now we're almost subverting the process, as the purpose of reviewing these committees is to make sure that they're go through CPRC, that we take the time to study them, to discuss, and to put something forward that's going to be agreed upon by all of council and has broader input. I think there's a lot of good elements from this policy, but I believe that we need to take the time to discuss as a council how we want to see committees function, because many of us haven't actually been involved in CUSA committees before, and therefore don't really have as much input on what could be changed. So I think it's a good start, but for the purposes of due process and making sure that we're following our other policies, that we make sure that we put this through review and discuss as a council and as a CPRC committee the changes we want to see to this before we take any action. And my other larger concern is that this policy removes the Constitution and Policy Review Committee as a standing committee. And I see that to be a very big oversight in terms of running of the association. As many of you have ever known, if you check the CUSA website, we have a lot of policies. And it's often very confusing, and it's often a large undertaking to manage these. And I feel like removing the committee whose sole job is to look over these policies and to ensure that they're properly looked after, to update them, is really doing a disservice to students. We can even see in CASA, they have their own governance and policy committee to do exactly this. And it's a testament to the importance of a CPRC committee or some kind of similar committee operating within CUSA. Because it's really important that we have board members and councilors reviewing the policy of the association on a constant basis to ensure that what we use to govern ourselves is properly up to code. So I feel like removing this committee, which would actually be removing the body, could be responsible for reviewing the committee policy, is a fairly big oversight. And it's just another one of the reasons why I think we should take a step back and put this policy and the committee policy as a whole to a broader review before we make any changes. Because I feel like it's important in the efforts of transparency and good change that any kind of changes to a policy is important as the committee policy is done through committee review and has input from many different stakeholders, including incoming councilors and board members. And it's for that reason that after this, I hope to move to table this for a later time. I guess unless I'm persuaded otherwise. Thanks.
You have a response? Okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so thank you, Councillor Rochek. I appreciate what you said there. I'll just start by mentioning that this committee reform is just dealing with CUSA Council. It's dealing with the CUSA Council standing committees. The board governs their own standing committees. That's up to them. So everything here just has to do with council, with the exception of the board nominations committee, which is a joint committee. Then to address your concern in terms of the CPRC. So one of my main goals in drafting this committee policy is to reduce the amount of standing committees that exist within CUSA. The more standing committees we have of council in particular, the really harder it is to fill these standing committees, to get members who are actually going to be engaged, members who are actually going to show up to schedule meetings to ensure that there is in fact quorum in these standing committee meetings. So while you are right in that this policy proposal removes the CPRC as a standing committee, that's not to say that the CPRC will not exist anymore. Any one of the councillors right now can move to create a CPRC committee, but that is within this committee policy and it's within the council rules of procedure that anyone can move to strike or to constitute an ad hoc constitution and policy review committee. My vision in terms of policy review for the organization, specifically to do with council, is to do kind of what the board is doing right now. So when a policy goes before the board in terms of review, it is delegated out to the standing subcommittee on which the policy most pertains to. So that way we are actually getting board directors who know a little bit more about that section of CUSA policy, that are engaged more in, for example, human resources issues or finance issues, to be the ones reviewing the committee if it has to do with the board, as opposed to just a general standing committee joint between council and the board. So my visions in terms of the CPRC, if someone wants to move a motion to create an ad hoc CPRC, that's great. But also I think it would be really great for council to better review policies is, for example, if you have a judicial policy that's coming up for review, or a policy that has to do with the student initiative fund, for it to go to the relevant standing committee, so that the finance committee or the agenda committee, for example, that have councillors that are a bit more apt with the policy in that section of CUSA's policy to be reviewing it. So that's sort of my contention there in terms of the CPRC. And then to address your point with regards to the Joint Jurisdictional Issues Committee, you are right. Under this policy, it would no longer be a standing committee. Again, that's not to say that council and the board cannot vote to constitute a Joint Jurisdictional Issues Committee. The reason why I did not include it as part of the standing committee is based on the advice that I received from other councillors and from senior staff within the organization that essentially said that the Joint Jurisdictional Issues Committee was not working in the sense that it should have. It was something that was only constituted a year ago and met very infrequently across last year. It didn't see a lot of use. So I think if it's something, if there is a particular joint jurisdictional issues, it's something where a committee can be constituted for that. And I think too, we have already fantastic standing committees of council and of the board that can deal with joint jurisdictional issues, along with myself as a VP internal, governing administration, the chair of the board, and other senior staff within the organization. So I'll leave it at that. My hope is that this policy will be passed here at this council meeting, because over the next month, the agenda committee will be embarking on trying to figure out committee placements for the next year. So if we keep our current committees policy, it will mean that these committees won't be in effect at all for this year, and I think that would not be very good at all for the amount of participation of councilors and committees and the involvement of committees in the council and CUSA process. So my recommendation to council is that we pass this policy now. And of course, if there are any amendments at a later date, if we get into the year and we realize that things aren't working exactly how they should, amendments can always be brought before council.
And we'll move on to Simon Harris, your statement.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I guess just kind of one thing from the board perspective to note is a very weird governance snafu that kind of comes out of this. One thing that you'll note if you compare the previous copy of policy GO4 to the current proposed copy is that the previous copy was a bicameral policy. Meaning that it would have to be reviewed by both council and the board. And the policy that's being presented here is supposed to be reviewed only by council. If you check within the box at the very top of the document. The only reason I bring this up is because if council chooses to go through with this policy today, is that we will in effect have two policies on the books regarding committees. We will have the old and the new policy, because then it will become our job as the board to either repeal the policy that's currently in place or to keep it as is. And what I fear is that say the board decides to, for instance, keep the current policy and modify certain sections, or to keep the policy in total, that we would in fact have two separate policies, and it's which will make it kind of difficult for operations. And I guess the second thing is because the board nominating committee is a joint committee, because we've already placed we've already signaled our nominee for that committee, and we have already filled a spot on the we've filled some spots, if I remember correctly. I'm just going to double check at this time. Just hold on one second. We have already filled some positions on the Joint Jurisdictional Issues Committee as well, that these committees would then be dissolved. So I guess that's just my issue is just kind of from a board perspective as well. If this policy is passed in effect, a committee that is a joint committee of the board and council would only be able to be edited and reviewed by council. And that is specifically in reference to the board nominating committee. The long-term strategic plan committee that's referenced in policy 0-1 and is mentioned in the policy proposal is, I believe, also a joint policy. Yes, it is bicameral. So if there are any changes that need to be made in that moment to, you know, the mandate letter, or need to be changed or augmented to that committee, the board does not have any authority to kind of change the scope beyond zero or beyond policy 0-1. So I guess that's just the one thing I will flag from our end. Thank you.
Response, and then
Yeah,
President.
I'll just respond really quickly to that. Thank you, Chair Harris, for that. I'll just note that the policy here that's being proposed is under council. It's the council standing committees, with the exception of the board nomination mandate letter, that terms of reference. So of course, that mandate letter is subject to the approval of the board. And I will just add that legislation has to begin at some point here at CUSA. We have two different legislative bodies here, so it's got to begin somewhere. And of course, if it's approved here tonight, it will be at the June board meeting. And of course, if board directors are looking for any changes, it would come back. The standard policy process in terms of having a bicameral legislative format here at CUSA. And then I'll just address the long-term strategic plan committee. all that the mandate letter is doing in the current committee policy here is that it's referencing the long-term strategic plan policy 0-0-1. That's a policy on its own, so there are no changes to that long-term strategic plan. All that this committee proposal is doing in terms of council is saying that for council, this is now a standing committee. And that is in line with our priority as CUSA to try and have long-term strategic plans going forward between every 3 and 5 years. So I appreciate the concerns in terms of joint jurisdictional issues. But I think that, of course, this policy would be before the board in June. And it's something that we'll hope the directors will review, just as councilors are doing here today.
And then we have the president. The floor is yours, and then Aiden, followed by Simon Harris.
So I'll speak in favor of this policy. Yes, I do agree that there has to be a need for committees, previous planning committees like the CPRC. We just wanted to consolidate all of that into one sort of like operations committee. For the ease of for the committee members to meet regularly and in a way. So if we definitely talked about this as well within our team, if there's a need for any ad hoc committees that's there, we actually recommend people, counselors to do that. So if counselors, I would even love to move the motion if you want to have a ad hoc subcommittee of the agenda and operations subcommittee, if that's something counselors would want about it. I'll just speak on the fact of council or the board at any point of time can amend any policy, whether if it's up for review or not. Review is just a time where it's like, well, you have to get back to it, but you can at any point revisit a policy and amend it at any given time, so that's okay. So on that note, I'll say that if council wants to go ahead and confirm this committee's policy, you're under the mandate to approve this policy even before it's reviewed. B, I would say on terms for the joint committees between the board and council, the only committee that's been affected is the JJJC, I believe. And I agree, Simon, we have to inform the board about it, about any change that is within it, and I'm sure it will just be procedure for us on the board level to assign a new director to the committee if need be. But the fact that we realized that last year that there wasn't anything coming onto the JJJIC, and same thing happened, I believe, with there was another committee, which is between the bicameral committee, between the board and the council. It was just human resources, yes, the human resources one. That's now been, that is just a board committee, I believe, right now. Subcommittee of the board. So I would just say that this is just helping in ease of how the operation of council is. We want all councilors to participate in it, which is I used to do subcommittee chair last year with the signatures committee, and it had 3 subcommittees, and it was hard filling students at large in those subcommittees and having actual counselors attend those subcommittee meetings and also attend the main committee meetings, right? So it's just a way to kind of consolidate all of that. There's still going to be a lot of important committees that, for example, AFCOM, we always have to establish an AFCOM accessibility committee. The university asks us to do it. We always have to do a ad hoc awards committee for the CUSA awards. We always have to do a board nomination committee. So that's always going to be there. It's just that the ones from the previous years, for example, CPRC was also created when it came to the point of the governance, the democratic reform. Now we're just moving into a more, I would want to say, a more modern, more consolidated committees policy, committees policy. So if needed, I would fully support to move a motion to have a subcommittee, an ad hoc subcommittee for the Constitution and Policy Review Committee. If Councilor Warchek, if that's what you're suggesting, we do. So that's all I'll say that now.
All right, then we'll have Councillor Aiden for your point.
Okay, I'll give one kind of final remark because I know we all want to get out of here. So I'm purely for this point, I'll just discuss, we have this policy is coming up for review now anyway. And I feel like we're jumping the gun by trying to pass something this soon because we have a system in place to properly review these policies. The committee policy will affect every councillor here, and I think we should all have an input in the policy that's going to govern how we govern ourselves. And I think, we're being a little too hasty to pass this at our first meeting. I know there are people who are concerned with the timeline and that we want to try and get this done now. But I think as incoming councillors, we should have a voice in how we're going to end up governing ourselves going forward. And as there is a proper review system in place for the policy process, I think we should follow that as it would anyway, and simply as it would streamline decisions between us, council and the board, and prevent any kind of governance shenanigans, as Chairperson Harris pointed out. I just think, this is a motion that has some really good elements, but just should be considered at a different time. And we should take the time, do the due process, and take the time as a committee and as council to review this together before hastily making any decisions. So that's where I'll end this. Thank you.
And then we'll have Simon Harris for chair board.
Yeah, I guess the thing I'll say on record and to repeat for council, this isn't necessarily being for or against the policy. It's just kind of something to flag that not this policy, but the previous one that was, or the one that's currently in place, will then have to go to the board for review. And it was on our schedule for review for some time in the winter anyways, so we were planning to look at it sometime later in the year. It's just we'll be in a position in which if we feel like we need to augment some components of the board nominating committee, it'll be out of our hands. Just based on what I can see within the mandate letter at this very moment. That's kind of the only thing that I will flag. I would not expect board members to be medaling more than Michael Phelps at the Olympics in council committees. Like that's not our business. It's just a matter of kind of joint committees that we can't really augment anything for. But do with that information what you will. Whatever council decides to do, we will review at the board. And yeah.
Yes, response.
I'll just say one last thing. Chair Harris is right. It's the responsibility of the board to look at this committee and look at this committee policy. And if it's something council passes, it will go to the board just as any other policy would that involves both legislative chambers. So while I appreciate their concerns there in terms of the board, it's the board's duty to review anything that has to do with them in the case of the board nominations committee. In my opinion, at least, that should not be a reason as to why councils are voting against it. It's simply the responsibility of the board as is outlined in our CUSA bylaws. And then just to say a last thing, Councillor Rochek had mentioned that the policy is up for review. Yes, all policies at CUSA are up for review. They're all on time dates. In the case of this one, I'm seeing it's up for review in April of 2024. The real benefit of passing it here tonight would be that these committees will be able to be filled soon, that we'll be able to fill committees based on this new policy, based on the policy that it's mandatory for every councillor to join a committee, based on the policy that we'll no longer have to try and fill standing many 7, 8, 9 standing subcommittees. And that will no longer have to go through the process of having student at large as voting members of the committee. As we've learned in the past couple of years, students at large are not really interested in joining as voting members of CUSA council committees, and it'll just make it more difficult for these standing committees to hit quorum. So in terms of this policy, yes, it's up for review, but I can really see the benefit of implementing it now because it gives us the opportunity to move forward with a productive year here at council with these committees instead of pushing it off for another year.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
All right.
If you wish to make a comment.
Yes, I wish to make a comment. I'll just speak as also like a former counselor myself and current counselor as well, that like there are issues with standing committees and how people are elected in it. And I feel this motion directly addresses that, because I understand the hesitancy and probably the possibility of overstepping a policies committee, but this gives urgency to counselors to also learn the committee, like the policies in the subcommittees that they would be joining. Because it is important that if you're in finance, you're familiar with sort of like the finance policies and the decisions that you're going to be making when you're part of your committee. So instead of just giving urgency to only one group, each counselor and in each of their positions, so as to also like gain that understanding and be an active participant, which I think is very important for a very active council and productive council in the year that we're planning to have, instead of pushing things onto later and always being sort of like hesitant in order to like get things done. So that's just sort of how I feel about this. Yeah, going on to President Faris and then followed by Michael.
I'll just add, it's just one of the ideas or why we did as part of our long-term strategy, or that's been in the books, is the executive composition. There's actually just the following motion. The executive composition committee. This year, last year there was an executive composition that was provided, which didn't happen, but this year we're looking to do an overview of the executive composition, how the executive team is and their portfolios and whatnot. So this sort of policy kind of goes with that aspect of how we want to change the portfolios of the vice president student issues, student life and community engagement for better representing students. So take it as like a skeleton of what the executive team would look like in the upcoming year. It's just food for thought, just trying to make our lives easier, so that if this is set up, then if once the executive composition committee is built in the next couple months, before the general election in January, the executive composition committee is able to give a recommendation to this council about what the executive team would look like for the future years at CUSA. And that way there's like, if there's any review or whatever, to go back to the committee and come back to it. So it's just an example. We've had this committees in the past. And yeah, I'll just leave it to that. So just think long term as well. Don't think like just immediately right now, but how this policy will stand the test of time in a way. I would want to say, and not just like every year a new team comes in, amends the policies, makes new policies or reduces new policies. This is a more concise way of putting it.
And Councilor.
Yeah, it's just a quick question again. If we were to delay this, would we be switching and pass this policy later? Will we be switching to the new committees, I guess, in the middle of the year? And also in terms of this CRC thing that we were talking about, this new ad hoc one, would it have the same authority as the formal one that is in place right now, and would it be able to, you know, basically achieve the same objectives as the committee right now?
So I'll just respond to that. Thank you, Michael. In terms of your first point, per the council rules and procedures, our committees, our standing committees of council, and that includes standing subcommittees as they currently are, need to be filled by the June council meeting at the latest. Meaning we would be filling committees for the year, our standing committees, and as of right now, standing subcommittees, based on the current policy that's in place for the year. Then if the motion is rejected tonight, and then if the motion comes back at a later date, that motion would be for committees next year. So that's kind of why I'm pushing for it now, and why I've put it here now, is because now would be the time to make amendments to the committee's policy, to reform it so that we have this new standing committee system for this council session for the year. And then to do with your second point on the Constitution and Policy Review Committee, as I have mentioned, as President Faris has mentioned, if council so wishes, and as President Faris has offered, to move a motion to constitute a committee, a CPRC committee, as an ad hoc committee of council. That's something that can follow whatever mandate letter, whatever terms of reference is put forward with that motion. So it can be the same mandate letter as as a standing committee that currently exists, or it could be something modified by whoever is moving the motion to make changes to the CPRC and how it functions under the.
Are there any further comments from anyone? All right, seeing as there are none, we'll need someone to second the motion. No, that's okay. So now we'll move to a vote. All right, so all those in favor for the motion to repeal and replace the committee's policy, please show of hands. And all those not in favor, please by show of hands, your votes, please. Okay, yeas of 8 and nay of 1. All right, and the yeas have it, the motion is approved. Moving on to our motion to constitute an ad hoc executive composition committee. Whereas an ad hoc executive composition committee was constituted during the last session of council with the mandate of reviewing and making a recommendation for CUSA's executive composition. And whereas the ad hoc committee did not complete its review during the last session of council, be resolved, council constitutes an ad hoc executive composition committee. Be it further resolved that council approves the following mandate letter for the ad hoc committee. Link is in the document. You may have a look at it if you have not already. Is there anyone to speak on this motion? Yes, President perhaps.
I'll just say that last year, the executive composition, all the proposals were postponed by the council. So it's important that we review that. I've been a part of the CUSA executive team the past 2 years, and well, a year and now my second year, is that there's a lot of work that needs to be done into kind of like smoothen the rough surfaces within the portfolios of the executives, and some of these positions are still new and evolving. We just need to solidify those that are best representative for the students. So I'll speak on that, and I would also like to nominate the counselors to the committee. I'd like to nominate Counselor Cavero because she worked in the executive composition last year as well. And I would like to also nominate Deputy Speaker or Chuck to the executive composition committee, and yourself, Speaker. Speaker, if all three of you wish to accept the nomination.
Interesting. Are there any comments from anyone on this? Question, what does that look like?
So just basically, you would, the point of this committee is that you'll come with a recommendation to CUSA Council about what the executive team would look like. So that's the executive composition. So you have 6 executives. So last year, some people said there has to be 3 executives. Some people said, well, where you still need 6 executives, it's important, but then they're gonna have more defined roles, more like different roles, all stuff like that, right? So essentially, I'll just speak from my personal experience. I do find that there's a lot of clash between VP, SI, SL, and CE portfolios. It's and if there's not a good understanding within the executive teams about how they like to take over projects, it can be very difficult for executive teams that come in a year where they're clashing with each other, like how my team sort of did in terms of like the job the responsibilities of and the duties of a portfolio. So that's the job. So you basically do some research, consultation, talk to previous executives, full-time staff, students for that matter, check out what other student unions are doing and present a proposal to council to adopt, and then that would be what the next executive team would be elected on. Makes sense?
Yeah. Sorry, would it take into account the previous proposed motion from last year from that committee?
Sure, yeah, all proposals are standing proposals in a way, it's up to the council to adopt it. Last year, we did not adopt one of the motions, or one of the proposals, or both of the proposals for that, the lack of time, the lack of like sort of debate for council to take on, so the vice president internal and I are envisioning that we do the executive composition well into the fall semester, so then council has time to review it, send back recommendations, and then the committee can give a revised proposal to council and approve it by the November council meeting, because there's no December council meeting, and then we cannot do anything before, because Jan is when the general election starts, so everything has to be done by November. So that's the idea. If we want the 2024, 2025 executive team to look different. It's up to now the council that I nominated if they wish to accept my nomination.
I'll accept.
Yeah, I'll accept it too. Honestly, it sounds interesting. Hard,
It'll
but
It'll be a good time.
yeah. It'll be a good time. Yeah.
Thank you,
Are
Ferris.
there any vote on that? Or-
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have a vote on passing this motion, and those of us who have been nominated, show of hands, can we have those in favor, please? And those against, the show of hands, 7, 8, 9, 10, yeah. Oh, all right, be it resolved, it's been approved. And now we move to the motion to adjourn to a specific time, which I guess would be training?
Yeah.
Yeah. So motion to adjourn to June 24th to that weekend of June 24th. Be it resolved that council adjourns until 10:30 a.m. of the 25th of June, and this shall constitute for the purposes of the act and our bylaws prior notice. Someone to move? Thank you. And someone to second? Thank you. And we are not voting on this. are we voting? And we vote show of hands, the yeas, please. Show of hands if you're in favor. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And those against. If they're in. All right. We are adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody.
Great meeting, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone. I was gonna say
All right,
Oh
well.
my
you
God.
know,
Stars. What?
Dude.
I'll give all the cards back to Logan. So you get back for next. Can I see the slide?
We did it. Hooray.
Let's go.